From Software are one of, if not the best game developers, and it's all down to their Dark Souls and similar style games. The Souls series are iconic for their amazing worlds and lore, fun combat and amazing bosses, so it makes sense that there will be other developers looking to do something similar to reach similar results. And that of course brings us to the term Soulslike. So what exactly is a Soulslike, since it gets thrown around so often? It's pretty easy to tell. Most have a lot of similarities, like the combat, leveling system, level designs, and things like checkpoints and losing the game's currency when you die. There has been many attempts at the Souls formula, and today I'll be going over the most popular, or the ones I enjoy most, to try and find out if there is one that is not only the best, but closest to reaching that FromSoft itch. So without further delay, let's get into it. The Nioh franchise is regarded as one of the best Souls-likes. It has really good gameplay with an intricate combat system. Now, I've got to be honest, I don't really like the Nioh games, however I don't think they are bad, to an extent. The combat in the Nioh games is great. There are so many weapons and you have different stances to use different movesets. The weapons are smooth and are fun to use, as well as all are viable options for your playthrough. There's not really a best weapon you can look up or find, it's really up to you and whatever weapon you enjoy the most. It also helps with how many items you find. You will always have like 100 weapons at your disposal, and they all have different bonuses like key recovery or adding more life. You will be constantly switching armor and weapons for better bonuses suited to your character, and it does keep the game fresh. But as good as the combat is, the game does have some major problems. For one, the story in both are really boring. It takes place in fictional Japan but has some characters from actual history. But the story is never really that interesting, and it's a Team Ninja trademark at this point to have a really boring plot but great gameplay. But my biggest problem with the Nioh series is how unbelievably cheesy it is. No matter what armor, what stats, what bonuses, every enemy, being a huge boss or a little gremlin thing, kills you in a max of 3 hits, most of the time 2 and sometimes just 1. Of course some of it is a skill issue. I'm not particularly good at the series, and don't get me wrong, I am jealous of people who can no-hit the game and people with all their buffs and knowledge on them, but for any casual player, dying in a couple hits when the game isn't balanced for that, like enemies do fast combos that stun lock you and you'll die in 1 second anyway, it's really frustrating and is the biggest reason I don't play them that much, even though I'd love to. I'm not sure if it's that developers don't know how to get that good balance with difficulty from the Souls games, or think that some people think the Souls games are hard, that they want to make their games hard at whatever cost, but whatever it is, it's really bad. It feels like you have to try and no-hit the game casually. It's actually insane. I also don't like the level system Nioh uses. You have main and sub missions that are toggled from a map screen. The main missions are unique and have a main boss at the end, but then these sub missions are just like going through the same level backwards to collect a certain item or something. It's pretty boring and repetitive. So overall, Nioh is a really interesting series with really fun combat and gameplay, but I just can't get behind the difficulty, and it's not even a get good thing, although getting good would most certainly help. It's actually unfair, and dying hundreds of times to even basic enemies is not fun for anyone. Lords of the Fallen released at the end of last year. It is the reboot of the abysmal original Lords of the Fallen from 2013, and it is a massive improvement over that title, even if that isn't too hard a task. Lords of the Fallen feels better than the original. The 2013 one was like playing in slow motion, whereas the reboot feels like it's around 0.75 speed, so it's definitely a bit better, although still has quite a bit of clunkiness to it. Now, one of the major and coolest parts of Lord of the Fallen is something called Umbral. You carry this lantern to see into the realm of the dead. It can unlock different ways throughout the world and offer new challenges and enemies to fight. It was really cool, and when you just look through the lantern and see all these huge corpse things and new ways for progression, was a great addition. The game does like throwing a lot of enemies at you at the same time, but it was kinda bearable at least, and the bosses were pretty cool as well. Mechanically they were fun, the dodging worked well as well, although it did have a certain bit of clunkiness to it. But overall, I mean, Lords of the Fallen was okay. It's nothing special, but nothing terrible. It's fun enough, and the bosses were pretty decent, and the Umbral was a really cool addition, but it was just that, a pretty cool game, which isn't the worst thing, but wasn't enough for me. Thymesia was really surprising. It was very cheap, being around £20, but I definitely got my money's worth, although the game is quite short. Thymesia has really great combat. It is pretty much Sekiro, however it's just as smooth as well. Pretty much all Souls-likes have some clunk to them, but Thymesia is really smooth and the combat is incredibly satisfying. You also have something called a claw, which when you attack enemies, they can regain health unless you attack using your claw to take away health from their health bar. You need to get the balance of normal sword attacks and a claw attack to make sure you are constantly taking their health bar down. Bosses are really well designed in Thymesia. They have fun and fair combos, and there's a fun variety of them as well. Thymesia follows the Nioh approach with a level system, and it's the same here as in Nioh. It works, but doing the submissions or just going through the level in another direction. However, the last mission in each set of submissions has a unique boss to fight, which was really fun, and the very last submission has the best boss in the entire game, so at least it wasn't for nothing. You also have a skill tree you get to level up, and you can choose different special attacks as well. Thymesia was a real gem, and it was really fun experience, and although the game being cheaper does justify its length more, I would love to see more of it, as I completed the whole game in around 6 hours. I'd love to see more from the developers and see them take on a bigger game. Rise of the Ronin is a really good game. It is Team Ninja's latest title, and I'd say it's the best. It has many similarities to their Nioh franchise, but is now set in an open world and is a more narrative-driven experience. Now, although it is more narrative-focused, I can't say that it makes the Team Ninja stories any more interesting. You play as a Blade Twin, basically an assassin, and have to kill someone to steal a secret message, but then another assassin comes in and seemingly kills your Blade Twin until you realise they are still alive and go out to find them. In the midst of it, you encounter either shogunate forces or anti-shogunate forces, and depending on your choices, you can work with or against it. You meet a lot of people along the way and gain new alliances. Now, I do like the more narrative-driven direction Team Ninja went for, but I just wasn't that interested in it either, although it was the most compelling out of their titles. But of course, this is Team Ninja, so the combat is the priority and is great as usual. Rise of the Ronin is most similar to Sekiro as well, as you can deflect every attack with a blade flash. You can still dodge, but enemies and bosses have special attacks that can only be countered with a blade flash, and the timing is incredibly generous, so I didn't see any need not to do it. You still have your different weapons to use along with different stances for different movesets, but now you're almost forced to use them, as different enemies, whether it be someone with a spear or a sword, will require a different stance to maximize damage to them. But the best part about Rise of the Ronin is that it is really fair. You can set your difficulty throughout the game, but even on normal, the game is actually pretty easy. There is no more dying in 2 or 3 hits, you can take much more damage, and the blade flash timing being longer makes the combat even easier. Also, when you are fighting multiple enemies, the ones you are not locked onto will be more passive, giving you time to fight one-on-one. Also, in main boss fights and levels, you are joined with a partner or two, and you can constantly switch between them if you need to attack from another angle. They might have another weapon whose stance is better suited to a certain enemy, or if you lose all your health, you will play as them instead, and you can revive yourself if you have time. Rise of the Ronin is almost too easy of a Souls-like, but I much prefer it to the other titles. It's still really fun and engaging and way less infuriating. The open world is actually surprisingly well done. Traversal is made easy with a horse you can summon at any point, as well as unlocking a glider that can be used pretty much anywhere to reach areas that you can't otherwise, and it is very seamless. You can summon your horse and automatically mount, or you can summon your horse while on the glider and land straight on your horse. There are also a lot of side missions that are pretty decent. There are lots of little encampments and such that need to be liberated from criminals, as well as things like shrines and other collectibles, as well as being able to pet cats around the world, which only makes the game better in my eyes. Although what wasn't good for my eyes are the graphics. Now, it is not a bad looking game at all, but the actual graphic fidelity, especially in big open areas, makes the game look like an Xbox 360 title. Now, as always, bad graphics don't make a game bad, and vice versa, but it is definitely noticeable here, and it is not to a high enough standard for 2024. But in the end, the game was incredibly fun. It kept the best parts of the Nioh games, and made it a more fun and fair experience. I found myself doing a lot more side content than normal, just because the game is that fun to play. But as the final game I'll properly mention, I'll already say it, Lies of P is probably, and is in my opinion, the best Souls-like that has been made. It is easily the closest to the FromSoft formula, but has enough of its own innovations and changes to make it stand out on its own. So I played Lies of P on release, and I'll be honest, the game kicked my ass. I really struggled with the balance between dodging and parrying. You can dodge and block enemies' attacks, but you can also perfect guard, which is pretty much the deflect from Sekiro, where you take no damage but add essentially posture damage onto enemies, making it easier to get a charge attack in for a critical hit. Enemies and bosses have an attack that needs to be perfect guarded in order to avoid damage. You can't dodge or guard them, and it is indicated by the boss becoming red. But the thing is, at least for me, the timing for the perfect guard is really precise, almost too precise, and I find it difficult knowing if this is more of a dodge or deflect kind of game, especially since the dodge in Lies of P actually works, unlike Sekiro where you don't have any iframe, so you will rarely use the dodge. And I guess Lies of P is kinda both. You can dodge bosses and enemies just fine, and sometimes I found that it was more effective, as for some attacks the perfect guard is too perfect, so the dodge was easier for success. But on the flip side, there are some bosses that perfect guarding are pretty much essential. Thymesia was the hardest boss I've maybe ever fought in any game, including the Souls games. However, as soon as I started guarding instead, it must have been within 3 attempts to actually beat her, and that was when I really got the game, right at the end typically. Dodging is helpful, but then not even perfect guarding, but normal blocking is really effective, especially with the rally mechanic from Bloodborne, where when you take damage you can get it back by attacking an enemy. And you can also be blocking, but if you time it you can also get a perfect guard during your block, so even if you mistime it you will still block the attack anyway. And that was the major learning curve I had to get. I was trying to dodge every attack, and Thymesia, for example, embarrassed me, and I found the game infuriating. But when I did replay it for the video with a better understanding of the game, I had a much better time, and it was much more satisfying. Although I do still think the perfect guarding timing window is way too short, but it is really fun mastering the boss's attacks. The combat has more to offer as well, with something called a Legion arm, on which you can use different abilities like a grappling hook or some electricity, which is very useful for the puppet enemies. You can also alter your weapon's handle. Your weapon is 2 different parts, the blade and the handle. You can mix and match for better scaling or for different damage types, and it can change how the weapon plays. I used the puppet axe, however the original version is a really slow and heavy weapon, so I changed it to a smaller handle, and it hits pretty fast while still doing the same amount of damage. The story is also really fascinating. It is a take on Carlo Collodi's The Adventures of Pinocchio, who is a puppet that is different to others as he can lie. Lying is a big part of the game and can change major story moments depending on your choices. The bosses are also really good, and not just mechanically, the designs are incredible. In Lies of P, the puppet theme is throughout the whole game. Most bosses are these robotic puppets that move in a very mechanical way. The puppet enemies move very stiffly, and when you do a lot of damage, some of their parts can come flying off or they start malfunctioning. And it's a really cool and unique concept. As a whole, they are really fair. They have fun attacks to dodge or perfect guard. Some of the standouts are Romeo, the Puppet King. The first phase is really cool visually, and the second phase with Romeo himself is really engaging. The Scrapped Watchman is really good early on, and is the perfect difficulty for that stage of the game, and as much of a pain as Thymesia was, the first phase was really fun, and getting the second phase down felt great. Overall, Lies of P is a fantastic Souls-like. It has plenty of similarities to the Souls games, but is unique enough for its story, enemy designs, and its own take on combat that it is a great addition to the genre. Now, of course, there are some Souls-likes that I missed out, and that's because I either haven't played them, or I don't consider them to be the most known or popular. There's ones like The Surge or Mortal Shell that aren't really as popular as the ones in this video, and I've not played the likes of Remnant, although I have heard it's good, so I might need to try that. But these were the biggest ones I felt that should be discussed, and on the screen would be my personal ranking of them if I had to put them from best to worst. Please let me know your rankings, as well as any Souls-likes I missed that deserve a mention. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.